Michaela, I'm your host.
And I'm your co-host, Nick. How you doing, guys?
How are we doing this week, Nick?
Not too bad, Michaela. How about you?
I'm good.
Another week at NBC Nightly News, huh?
So for this week's topic, I kind of want to touch on, I've been wanting to do for a while an episode on different icons in the horror community, because I think they are pillars of the community that make up the genre for what it is. You know, they star in a lot of movies, they direct a lot of movies. But doing a research, we actually found that we could do a whole episode on just horror directors alone.
Yes.
Since there's so many to talk about and honor.
Yes, and they don't really direct horror movies throughout their entire career, but they do a lot of them, at least the ones that we picked.
Yeah, some of them do. Some of them
they're iconic. You know, you hear the name, you're like, oh yeah, definitely horror.
Yeah.
You know,
they revolutionized the genre, made it what it is. But of course, there's a couple people like here and there that just have like one-hit wonders, or
sure.
I mean, of course, Steven Spielberg did Jaws, which you don't think of him really as like a horror icon.
No, you think more of him, yeah, like sci-fi, but
I would say like inventive, you know?
Yeah, innovative, because he did Saving Private Ryan, too.
And Jurassic Park, which was...
Yeah, that too. Yeah, so that's...
as well.
Would that be considered sci-fi? We really don't know. I mean...
But it's weird, because, yeah, you have like those one-hit wonders that, you know, they could still contribute to the horror genre, but at least for my research, I kind of touched on those that did multiple movies that kind of made up the genre and what it is today.
Sure.
And those that have a special place in my heart, at least.
Yeah, no, definitely. Same here. I mean, I did... Mine's kind of like a 50-50.
Okay.
Oh, like more like a 60-40.
Gotcha.
But, yeah, I mean, if you want to start, you go ahead. We can start with you.
Okay, so the first one I chose to talk about is probably my favorite director of all time, just because he directs my favorite scary movie and favorite movie. I picked Wes Craven.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you who don't know, Wes Craven was born in 1939. That's crazy. And he lived all the way, he lived till 2015.
So, how old was he?
He was
80, just 80, right?
80. I think he died of some kind of like stomach cancer or something. But he lived a long time, and he's seen a lot of shit in his lifetime. But for those of you that don't know, maybe you live under a rock, I'm not sure, but he directed Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, Last House on the Left, The Hills Have Eyes, The Serpent and the Rainbow.
Oh, I love that movie. That's one of my favorites.
He directed a lot of huge movies in the horror community. Like, just inventing Freddy Krueger himself was an icon. Like, he could have retired after that and called it a day, but he didn't. He went on to do one of the biggest horror franchises of all time, which is Scream.
Right.
And he did, I think, the first 4 Scream movies he directed.
Oh, wow, really? All 4? I didn't know that.
But at first, when he first started directing, he came out of the gate with more, like, shock factor movies, like Disturbing Content. It was more just kind of to make his name known, is what I got from it.
Sure.
For those of you who haven't seen Last House on the Left, it's a pretty brutal film. There's a lot of essay in it. Hills Have Eyes. I do enjoy that movie, but it's definitely shocking if you haven't seen it and you're not sure what you're going to walk into.
Yes, yeah. And the thing with like Last House on the Left, it was like a revenge movie, kind of. Like, it starts out, you're kind of thinking like, oh my god, this is like appalling watching it.
It's
like,
super appalling,
It's, you know, it's just like violent, you know, rape scene and like eventual murder. And then all of a sudden it's just like, these people end up at the parents' house of the girl they just killed.
Right.
You know?
And if you haven't seen the movie, like, I said the first time I watched this, I'm like, if I didn't know the ending of this movie already, I wouldn't finish it out.
Yeah.
Because I would see the beginning and see how brutal it was and how appalling it was, and I wouldn't finish watching it.
No, I agree.
Especially for the time being coming out, I think it was in the 70s.
Yeah, it was like 72.
Yeah, that's early on to do something like that. So Wes Craven definitely very innovative for the time. And I think he's definitely had a lasting impact on the genre.
Sure.
So he studied English and psychology and Wheaton College in Illinois. He had a bunch of various jobs working as a college professor, which I think is so cool. I would love to have a college professor.
Cool. That's great. That
would be sick.
So sweet.
He worked as a sound editor on movies and then later a filmmaker. He got into New York City Film Company, worked his way up, and some fun facts I found about him were his parents were actually hardcore Baptists. So he wasn't allowed to watch any horror movies growing up.
Oh, no kidding.
And he turned into one of the iconic horror movie directors. Coming out with Last House on the Left alone would be like, your parents were Baptist? Like, you were raised Baptist?
Yeah, that movie, I mean, even, like, for its time, that was so out there.
Oh my god, yeah. His aspirations when he was younger were actually to be an author. Mm-hmm. And then he went to the movies and saw the 1968 Night of the Living Dead, and he said, right then and there, I'm going to change my aspirations, and I'm going to make horror movies.
Sure.
And he definitely did. I remember reading somewhere that Freddy Krueger was actually like a bully he had when he was in elementary school.
Oh yeah, I remember hearing that too. Yeah, so he named
the villain. Yeah. So that was one of the villains that he had.
Yeah, why not make it my bully? You know?
Brought it to real life like that, and then just going on to make the Scream franchise is just so.
I know the Scream,
iconic.
The Scream franchise, that was just so, because it was so innovative. Because it's like there's never been a movie like that. There hasn't been since then, you know, and that's going on almost 30 years now, you know, so.
And just like Scream, like especially the first one when he directed it, like, let's advertise that we have a big star in the movie, we have Drew Barrymore, and we're going to kill her in the first 10 minutes. Like, that's just crazy. It's out of the gate. I mean, people are going to see that movie for the big star, and she gets killed in the first 10 minutes.
You had Courtney Cox, you had, Neve Campbell, I don't know how big she was at the time, but Courtney Cox, she was on Friends and everything, too.
Neve Campbell had just done The Craft, I think that was it.
Yeah. Was that The Craft? Or was that
No, she did The Craft.
It was The Craft? Okay. All right.
But still, just a crazy movie. It kind of breaks the fourth wall of filming because they openly talk about, you know, any one of us can be the killer.
Yes.
It's one of those movies that when you watch it, you want to watch it again and be like, could I have picked up on this the first time? Like, who's the killer? Could I have seen
it? Yeah, you keep wanting to go back and, like, review and see, like, oh, yeah, it's definitely that guy.
Yeah.
You know,
because, I mean, spoiler alert, the movie's been out for 20 years, so I'm not reading it. Like,
sure.
They said something at the water fountain, like how they, I don't know, remember if they mimic it, like how they would stab somebody, and they talk about it blatantly, and you're watching it the first time, you don't think twice about it.
Oh,
it turns out that they're the killers.
Oh, I never even realized it. Well, we gotta go back and watch it now.
Or we can watch the Scary Movie, Scare of It, which is also just as good.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, Scary Movie does a really good job at making like fun at that movie because it was like it's so outrageous.
But no, I love Wes Craven. I love most of his movies. I would say even The Hills Have Eyes. I think it's a really good
that's a good concept for.
I think it's super creative.
Mm-hmm. I feel like they like tried to remake a lot of that with like the like Wrong Turn, kind of like the whole.
I agree.
You know,
he invented that like storytelling of horror essentially because that hadn't been done before with like these mutant people.
Yes, I agree.
In the US,
like, what was that? It was like 76 or something that came out.
It was 1977.
77.
Yep.
Okay.
And then so very early on. He went on to do Nightmare on Elm Street in 1984, which was iconic.
Oh, that's what he's most well known for, isn't it?
Yes, I think it's arguable between Freddy and Scream, which one's more he'd be most well known for. But regardless, the guy's an icon, and rest in peace for sure. I mean,
oh yeah, I mean his whole depiction of Freddy, it's just such a
I think
freaky, weird thing that nobody's ever done in horror, and nobody can remake that or top that. You know,
no. It's so creative, and I think even in one of the first Scream movies I did without him, maybe the fifth one, the opening title, it says Ford West. And for anybody that doesn't know, I mean, he made the franchise what it was. He made it a franchise, made the story, made everything about it. So he deserves all the recognition in the world. I love him. I think he's such an icon.
That's a good pick. That's a very good pick.
Sure.
All right. Well, I'm going to start with my number 10 pick, I guess. I don't know. We're doing 10.
Well, they don't have to necessarily be in order. I would say Wes Craven's my favorite. So maybe I'm like counting backwards.
Yeah,
I might be counting from like 1 to 10.
1 to 10, okay. I guess this would be like my 1 to 10, I guess. So it's Jean Rollin, and a lot of you people I don't think are gonna know him unless you're like a diehard like horror / not really exploitation, but kind of like pervy. I don't really know what to call him. But basically, he is a French director. He was born. I'm not going to be able to pronounce a lot of the places. And titles of his movie because they were only released in France for like a long period of time. But they just recently, like I want to say, like in the past 30 years, it became 20 years released like on streaming services on the internet through like Shudder, Tubi, and those kind of streaming services. But as soon as I saw a couple of his films, I fell in love with them. I thought they were so good because it's not like your typical B foreign horror movie where it's just kind of like outrageous and sleazy.
Right.
I mean, they're sleazy, but they're not sleazy in the way you think of sleaze. It's more of a classy sleaze. A classy sleaze, if you can believe it. Well, wait till you hear my number 9, and you'll be like, okay, I understand. With the number 9. So, basically, so he was born in 1938, and again, I can't pronounce this, so I'm just going to say France.
Yeah.
And he has a career spanning over 50 years. He passed away in 2010. But basically, he started out with his first film in the late 50s, early 60s, and it was a short film, and it was about this woman. I think she was going to commit suicide off the cliffs, like straight to the Gibraltar, somewhere in Spain or something like that. And it was just a very short film. I think it was only like 15 minutes. And you can, if you have Arrow, I think they still might have this up. You can watch that 15-minute. It's nothing like crazy or anything with like the suicide or anything like that. But it's cool to watch because they have a whole like trilogy, not trilogy, but a whole
like sequence or
franchise. Yeah, I guess dedicated to Jean Rollin. So that was like one of his first movies, and then his big break came in, I think, 1968. It was, I'm not going to even try, but I think it was called The Rape of the Vampire, and it was it was like a softcore porn type of movie. There's a lot of like nudity and everything like that, but there was also a lot of like violence and stuff entitled with it. A lot of nudity.
Which is a lot of scary movies.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, when you break it down, like going back, I mean, like he did it probably first, let's say, but like, yeah, there's a lot. I mean, softcore stuff like that in the horror movies is prominent through, like all the way up until today, let's say, But he was like kind of the first one to do it, and essentially, that movie was just like these two girls, they wander into like this castle. It's very weird because he kind of made it more of like a poetic thing. Like there was not a lot of talking, no dialect in his movies. It was more just like the experience you're viewing. Right. There's like all this weird stuff's going on, like these women going to this castle, and there's like these vampire women. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. Doing stuff and being very flirtatious to these women, and all of a sudden they're vampires by the end of the movie essentially. Right. So it was really like his big break. He did a lot of like I guess like kind of like softcore, not really sleazy though. They're more like art films,
It's like a hard class.
Yeah, it wasn't just like blatant porn, happening on camera.
Had a storyline.
There was somewhat of like a storyline. It was very classy done, I really like his movies. I'm not trying to say that in like a weird way, but they're very good. One of my favorite films that I think everybody should watch is The Iron Rose. And it's about these two people that get trapped in a cemetery somewhere in Paris, and they get trapped in there overnight, and they just completely go insane. It's a great. I'm surprised I didn't put this on my psychological thriller horror movie list.
Well, it's hard to narrow down at this time. I mean, we can do some of these topics again. It's hard to narrow down.
It is, like, because you're not thinking about it, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I forgot about Jean Rollin, right. And that movie is one of my favorites because it's so creepy. There's like hardly any talking in it, and it's just like you watch these people go into the cemetery. They're exploring it. They go into this crypt, and then like the next thing you know, it's nighttime. They're stuck in there, and then just like weird shit starts happening, and it just is. It's so kind of just like displacing. You're kind of like, what am I watching? Where am I while I'm watching this? Yeah, it's very, very. It makes you feel a certain way, to say the least, And, and then that's, I could talk a little bit about his career. He saw his first film during the Second World War.
He's old.
Yeah, he was born in the 30s. He was prominent through the 60s, 70s, up until I think the 2000s, and then he kind of retired. And then he eventually passed away. I don't know from what though. And he had a bunch of good films. I just want to go over a few because there are a lot of good ones that he did. I'm trying to get to what he created, and they're all in French, of course. There's Requiem for a Vampire, The Iron Rose, like I said, Rape for a Vampire, which one is his first ones. Fascination, that's another really good one. The Living Dead Girl, that's going to be a Grindhouse classic because that was released here in America, dubbed over. You can't find it dubbed over anymore, but you can find it with subtitles in French, and that's an iconic horror movie, Living Dead Girl. But yeah, he's just done a bunch. I wish I could tell you more. Oh, here they are. They're English title right here. So the New Vampire, which is a great one. The Shiver of the Vampires. The Demoniacs, which is another one of my favorite ones. That's a really good one. It's about this. Sorry if I'm rambling, but I'm
not rambling at all. That's what podcasts are for.
This is a great film. It's about these band of like pirates that it's kind of like the siren song of like Greek poetry, where like the sirens would lure these ships into like the rocks and crash them and then pillage the ships. So essentially that's what they did. It was like these group of bandits, they would wait for a ship to get shipwrecked, go and take prisoner, rape, and kill the women and men on the ship, and then they would take all their treasures. So this movie essentially starts out like that. You see all that happen in the first 10 minutes. But the ghost of these two girls that they raped and killed comes back, and they start to haunt the people, and it just descends into madness. It's a great film. It's all in French, of course. That came out, I think, in 1974. That's one of my all-time favorites. Between that and The Iron Rose. But yeah, just he's one of my favorites. I love this guy. I think he did a lot for horror cinema, especially foreign horror cinema. So yeah, if you like him, then if you like that kind of stuff, go check out his movies. I feel like he's very underrated. I feel like a lot of people don't know about his films.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've never heard of him.
Yeah, we'll have a day where we'll watch a bunch of his movies.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I have a hard time with the nudity in horror. Sometimes it just gets to be too much. I'm just like, really?
Yeah, there's a lot, but it's foreign. It's foreign. Well, that's they don't. Sexuality in America, they understand it as it's just that's natural. What it is. It's a natural thing. There's not.
Yeah, it's a little bit different over there. So I have a little more grace for that, but sometimes it just gets old. It's like, oh, of course she's topless, like running through the woods, getting stabbed.
No, I agree. I mean, I'm like kind of like that doesn't really make or break the story. If she's naked or whatever, but it's still very good.
So for my next pick, I picked somebody that is probably not what the horror community ever expected to be, like such an iconic director, just due to his background. But I picked Jordan Peele. Mm-hmm. And for anybody that doesn't know, Jordan Peele used to be on a show. It was a comedy sketch show called Key and Peele.
Oh yeah.
With Keegan-Michael Key, which this was a great show. And this is when I was first introduced to Jordan Peele. All the Key and Peele sketches that I've seen, especially on like YouTube and Comedy Central and all that. But Jordan Peele was born in 1979 in New York City, and he actually majored in doing puppets in college.
Puppet theater.
Which I didn't even know you could major in.
Really? No good. So like a Jim Henson, like elective.
Yeah, I guess in New York City maybe there's more options in those colleges, but yeah, he literally majored in puppetry.
More power to you. That's awesome. I'd love to do that.
Majored in puppetry, probably some kind of improv as well. But he's just a very talented guy. Like, all this background in comedy, all this background in, like, doing stage shows and improv and all that. And going from that to doing some iconic horror movies within the last 5 years, I'd say, is just not, I don't think, what anybody expected. So, for anybody that doesn't know, Jordan Peele's first film that he came out with was 2017's Get Out. Which I love this movie. I've seen this movie like 5 times. Yeah, to come out of the gate with Get Out was pretty.
That was a good. I loved that movie. I thought that was so good.
I've showed that to like 5 different people. I watch it quite often. I love Get Out. It's a very suspenseful. There's some comedic relief given his background. There's some funny parts to it as well. And then he comes out 2 years later with Us, which Us is pretty good as well. That came out in 2019, and then Nope, which I think came out in 2021, 2021 or 2022.
That's really good. I did like
And then he remade Candyman recently as well.
Oh, that was him?
That was him.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. And these films are all so well done. Like, I love... First of all, they're always aesthetically pleasing. Like, the way they're shot is always very clean cut. I love the casting that he does. I love the social commentary in these movies, which is probably the biggest part of his directing style, is all the social commentary and all the hidden Easter eggs and clues.
Sure.
Like the movie Us, he said that movie is filled head to toe with Easter eggs.
Right.
Everything has a meaning. Like, down to the song that they're listening to in the car, everything has a meaning. Like, he put everything into this movie, essentially.
But, I like that.
Yeah.
Dedicated director.
I mean, Get Out is all about race, which we touched on Get Out a little bit in the first episode, but Get Out is definitely about race. Mm-hmm. Us is kind of about the caste system in America and, like, you know, if you have money or you don't have money. Nope, I don't really know what Nope would be about.
It was like extraterrestrial, I think.
It was like alien.
Yeah. But it was weird because it wasn't like your typical alien, like
not at all.
No. You know, this is like an interdimensional entity that came through. It was weird.
And then of course Candyman. For those of you that haven't seen the original, Tony Todd's kind of
that's Clive Barker. Clive Barker. We didn't do him. I'm sorry, you know.
The original Candyman kind of references like police brutality and things like that, and you know, saving African Americans specifically from police brutality, being wrongly imprisoned, and things like that.
Yes.
And he redid the movie and kind of almost took it a step further and just made that message even more apparent to the viewer.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And he uses this avenue of horror movies to make these social commentary points, and I just think it's genius. I think all his work is genius. Mm-hmm. I can't say anything bad about Jordan Peele, and I just think it's the most unexpected contribution to the genre.
No, I definitely agree.
Watching Key and Peele, I would never be like that guy.
Yeah, I mean, you know, because I'm a huge fan of Twilight Zone too. So when he rebooted the Twilight Zone.
He did, yeah.
I never really watched it because I'm a diehard. You know, I love Rod Serling, so he's my favorite person in the whole world. So
he redid some of the Twilight Zone episodes. So he's just a really popular, or not popular, like well-diverse, interesting guy.
Yeah, he appreciates the horror genre.
He does. And I listened to another podcast, and they touched on how the actors of Us, before he cast them, he was like, I want you to watch these 10 horror movies that are like basically the best horror movies ever, essentially.
Right.
And I'm going to pull things from all these different horror movies, and it was like Funny Games, Jaws, A Tale of Two Sisters, like all these different movies, and he's like, The Lost Boys. And everything in Us comes down to pulling things from these movies. Like, he just truly appreciates the genre for what it is.
Right.
And I don't think he takes anything for granted. And
he's paying homage to it, you know, directing it, which is awesome. I love when people do that.
I think it's the Santa Monica Pier, the same one that was in The Lost Boys. He pays homage to that in Us because he says, like, oh, they're shooting a movie over there, and like the time period.
Oh, yeah. Because it would have been like The Lost Boys. Yeah, 88, I think.
And the dad was like, oh, I should go try out. And he just pays homage to all that, and it's just great. And then, like, Funny Games, because, like, in Us, when they're sitting down at the table, like, you're literally sitting down with your captive, essentially, at the same table.
Funny Games, that's that. We watched the original one, the German one, and man, that was super. I haven't seen the original one.
Well, that movie is a commentary too for like the violence that we have in cinema.
Yes,
it's all about.
They did a great job because I was just like, that's insane.
How we're all like desensitized to violence and.
No, not with you. Go and watch Funny Games, and you watch that scene where you'll know what I mean. Yeah.
I don't know what you can say.
You're not going to be desensitized.
If you know, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love Jordan Peele. I'm really happy he's on the scene. I hope he keeps coming out with movies because I've loved all of them.
Yeah, I definitely like a lot of the movies he has made. Not a big fan of the Us, but all the other ones I really enjoyed.
Yeah, the first time I watched it, I was kind of like, I don't know. The second time I watched it, knowing how much effort he put in, it gave me a whole new appreciation for it.
Right. I like the whole twist in Us, but the whole movie before that, I was kind of just like, okay.
It's funny though. I love the dad in that when he's like trying to sell the boat off, and they're literally crying, and the daughter's like, "Dad, no one wants the boat."
Yeah, there was some good.
There's like some good one-liners in there for sure.
Yeah, probably relief in that.
It's such a high-stress movie.
Yes, definitely.
No, I like Jordan Peele. Like I said, I hope he keeps coming out with movies for sure.
Yeah, I definitely hope so too. All right, so for my number 9, I picked. Jesus Franco. So he was born in Spain. So this is a foreign director, and he did a lot of like low budget exploitation and B movie films. Um, he did a lot, actually, quite a bit of them, almost 200 films that he did.
Oh, wow.
And I love a lot of his movies because, again, like when he started out, he was very. It wasn't like, sleazy. I guess it wasn't like meant to be like, softcore porn, basically, that you can go see in like a movie theater. But essentially, yeah. So he started out back in 1959. He actually started out as like making musicals. Directing them, I guess, and then getting into like crime dramas and everything like that. And then his first big break was in 1962 when he made The Awful Dr. Orloff. Now, if you've been watching the podcast, I mentioned this a couple episodes ago. It's one of my favorite films.
Is that the one where his daughter gets burned?
Yes.
And he's trying to do a skin graft. And
yes.
Those people to get the skin graft.
Yeah, he basically is trying to find skin for his daughter to graft back onto her. And it's an awesome movie. There's no sleaze involved in this one. This is like one of my favorite like horror. It's technically like a Spanish version of a Giallo movie, but it's a horror movie in my eyes. And super brutal, very, for the time, shocking and everything. I definitely think it blows Psycho and any of the other movies of that time out of the water. And then he kind of got into spy thrillers throughout the rest of the 60s. It wasn't really until the late 60s, early 70s, he got actually paired up with the best person for any kind of horror movies, Sir Christopher Lee, with The Bloody Judge and Count Dracula. If you've ever seen Count Dracula's movie done by Jesus Franco, it's freaking violent and awesome if you love, like, good horror. That's probably one of my favorite Count Draculas, is the one that Jesus Franco directed. And then, basically when it came into the 70s, that's when he got into the sleaze. There were some good movies he did. There was Exorcismus, Virgin Among the Living Dead. They're good, but there's a lot of nudity and like, stuff that could be taken out of the, the whole plot. That's really what I got to say about him. He died in 1996. I'm sorry, he didn't die in 96. He died in 2013, I believe, of a heart attack. But yeah, I mean, the list of his movies, there's some good ones. I just want to like kind of relate to you guys just so you can go and check them out. I'll try to limit the sleaze, but definitely The Awful Dr. Orloff. The Sadistic Baron von Klaus, that's one you definitely have to see. He did a couple of spaghetti westerns too. I can't remember the names. The Diabolical Dr. Z, that's kind of like a cult classic. So you guys definitely, if you're familiar with cult classics, I'm sure that one has popped up.
I'm sure anybody listening to us has a couple cult classics to listen to.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Necronomicon, that's another good one that he directed. It's the Spanish one. It's not the other one that you guys are thinking of. Girl from Rio, that's a kind of a sexploitation movie. That's more of like a prison camp sexploitation kind of thing. And then he does The Castle of Fu Manchu, which is, I believe Christopher Lee stars in that one too. And that's actually a good one. Not really horror, kind of more like an action. Same with Venus and Furs. He did kind of all throughout like the cult movies. He kind of is prominent, and which I loved about him because, like again, the Bloody Judge with Christopher Lee, Count Dracula. I mean, I love that one. That's probably my favorite one. He did a Jack the Ripper one too. It was called The Ripper, and it was awesome. Klaus Kinski was in it. I believe Christopher Lee also was in it too. And oh man, he just has some great movies. She Killed in Ecstasy, Justine. I can go on and on and on. I love the movies that Jesus Franco made because yes, they're sleazy, but they also are very gory. There's a big horror plot to it. There's a lot of like vampires. There's killing. There's everything that you could find in a horror movie. But I feel like he focused more on like the sleaze, you know, the sexual aspect of it and everything, which can make or break a movie, you know. I feel like he might have broken more than anyone else. Yeah, and yeah, he got in like in the 80s. He kind of got into the whole Italian cannibal thing, but they were don't go watch them. They're so bad. And it's like he made two that were literally like he just retitled them basically.
It's the direct copy.
Yeah, like this is this movie. It's also this movie. But yeah, that's Jesus Franco. I love him, and I think all you guys will too if you actually give some of his early work a chance. And if you really like the sleaze, you know, maybe even the 80s or late 70s, early 80s ones too.
Okay. So for my next pick, I picked the one, the only, the icon. I picked Alfred Hitchcock, which he just is horror. I don't even know how better to say that. He was born in 1899, right at the turn of the century. Yeah. He was born in Essex, England, and I guess from an early age he developed an interest in art and entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
But he's best known as like the master of suspense, the master of horror. He came out with the legendary Psycho, The Birds, which I love, The Birds, Rear Window. All his movies are just like Psycho alone is. A lot of people consider Psycho as the best horror movie of all time.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that alone is definitely a feat as a director. His first major success was a movie called The Lodger, a story of London fog, and it was a silent film. I guess it was a suspenseful silent film, which is kind of a tough thing to do, I would assume.
Yeah, I don't know how you do that, honestly.
Because music, especially music, plays a huge part of suspense in movies. So to make a successful silent film that's suspenseful is a feat for sure.
Mm.
He came to Hollywood in 1939, and his first Hollywood debut was a film called Rebecca in 1940, and then Shadow of a Doubt in 1943. Mm-hmm. And then he didn't come on the scene as big until Psycho came out in 1960.
Sure.
And then he was a household name for sure.
Mm.
But he's best known for, you know, his signature style. I mean, he broke, like, the barriers of the time. Like, Psycho alone was just such an innovative movie, and we touch on it a lot. Like, Psycho and The Exorcist, I feel like get touched on and talked about so much, but they deserve it. They really do.
Oh, yeah. No, like, I definitely agree.
I say gore in parentheses because the gore that Psycho had is nothing that we have today, but for the time being, it was just appalling to have that shown on screen.
I think for that specific year, yeah, definitely.
Definitely appalling, and it paved the way for what we have now. I mean, who knows when this would have came on screen if Alfred Hitchcock didn't do it, you know?
Yes, no.
He wasn't the first to break this barrier and do this, then who knows?
Right.
And then he came out with a bop, The Birds, 3 years later, 1963.
That's my favorite Alfred Hitchcock film, is The Birds.
Which, yeah, I love The Birds. I watched that, I think it was on TV one day, and my mom was like, oh, you should watch that, it's good, and ever since then, I've loved it.
Yeah.
And it's a good creature feature, and for those of you that haven't seen it or don't know, a little fun fact is these birds kind of started going crazy and attacking humans, and these birds, not braids, were actually untrained, so they were actually attacking these people. There was no, like, trainer or anything on set, so it was just animals going crazy, attacking people, doing what animals do, and nobody was there to train them or guide them. They were, like, truly... I mean, acting, but not acting, because these birds were attacking them.
I mean, that's the best way to get, like, a real response, you know?
What was her name? I think it was Tippi Hedren.
Yes.
Was the main girl, the blonde girl.
Yes, Tippi, yeah, she had a weird name.
Yeah, he collabed with a lot of big
Rod Taylor,
actors.
he was the guy, too.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
He collabed with a lot of big actors and actresses at the time, for sure, and just an icon. Like, I don't think he needs an introduction. I don't think he needs much.
I mean, he just is one of the foundations.
Like, the fathers of horror, I would say.
Yeah. And you know, he had, like, the Alfred Hitchcock Hour. I think that was back in, like, the mid to late 50s. I mean, that just itself for a TV show was amazing.
Even just his voice. Like, his voice was so creepy.
Good evening. It was his silhouette, too, that would show up. Yeah. And, like, it was like a shadow, and it was good evening. It was just, like, the big tummy and everything.
Good evening. Just an icon. I mean, Psycho has definitely had a lasting effect on the genre. I mean, anybody that sees Psycho, it's one of those movies you just never forget.
Yes, and I think like we talked about in our first episode, it was like a lot of people consider that being like one of the first horror movies. You know,
considered the first
slasher. I should say, not horror.
Yeah,
but
definitely considered the first slasher. I know if you go to like Universal Studios to this day, they do this whole like Psycho-esque like reenactment. It's actually like quite fun. You go on this like train ride and you go by the hotel and like there's Norman Bates and he's pretending to put something in his trunk and it's a body.
Right.
And the guy driving the car is like acting. And he's like, we have to keep driving. And then Norman Bates starts walking really fast towards the car. So they still honor it. Like, it's still a big movie.
Yeah.
And I mean, nobody... I mean, when did it come out? 1960?
1960.
I was going to say nobody was really around. I guess maybe there's some people that were around.
Yeah.
They're definitely really old now.
Oh, well, being of age to... You know,
being of age to go see it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you got to be at least, what, you think, maybe 13, 14?
But to have, like, a whole generation of people that weren't around when a movie came out, but still know everything about it and know, like, the impact of it and the plot and everything.
Sure, yeah, watched it, like, impact society.
It's a pretty big feat, yeah. Not to have the movie come out when you were alive, but you still recognize it for what it is. It's a pretty big thing.
Sure. No, I definitely agree with you.
All right, what's your next one?
All right, so I got, so the next four actually, I believe, are going to be, Italian, directors, and I love foreign horror, in case you guys haven't realized that yet. So I picked, Umberto Lenzi. He was born on August 6, 1931, in Massa Marittima, province of Italy. He was a film enthusiast of early age. He actually went to school studying law, but he also created a film fan club, basically. So he was always kind of obsessed with movies. After, you know, he figured out he didn't want to do anything with law, he started pursuing a, you know, film school and everything like that.
What a jump.
He basically got involved doing screenwritings and, you know, like minor directing for some Italian films and everything like that. And, like, he kind of would take, like, he'd rewrite, basically, he'd turn a novel into a movie, essentially. That's what, like, he was doing from 1950s up until the late 60s, essentially. And then, his big claim to fame was, I want to say, he did a couple kind of like spaghetti westerns and like retelling of old tales. Essentially, like there's like he did like a Robin Hood movie and stuff like that. But his big claim to fame, I think, came in like the late '60s, where he did their erotic thrillers. They're really not sleazy. They were like pioneer giallo movies. With Carol Baker, and she's like kind of like a queen of giallo films if you follow Italian horror and crime and everything like that. But he did Orgasmo, So Sweet, So Perverse, and A Quiet Place to Kill. It was like kind of like a triple feature he did with Carol Baker, and they were like a huge hit. And they're actually really great movies if you go and watch them. It's like a whodunit crime movie, but there's like a lot of like manipulation, psychological horror going on in it because you think like she's going insane in all these movies. It's kind of like all kind of the same plot in a sense, but it's very well done, and that's kind of, I think, like what I would call his big breakout into like the film industry. And then that brings us into the 70s, where he came out with like true giallo films, like Seven Bloodstained Orchids, and then he did a lot of Edgar Wallace novels, which were like kind of like these early, I believe they were 50s and 60s crime comic books. I believe he was a German writer or comic, I don't know what you'd call a comic guy, but a writer. And then he did Knife of Ice, which is a great, it's your classic. I'm sure you guys have heard this in school. It's like somebody was killed with an icicle.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
Back in the day.
It was like the card.
They always tell you, like, don't stand underneath the...
Yeah, but there was a stab wound, but there was no weapon found. Nobody could ever find a weapon, but there was water under the stab wound. What could have killed her? An icicle, you know. So he basically kind of pioneered off that like whole tale. And then and he basically also, which I wanted to mention him, was the man that made the cannibal movies of the late 70s and early 80s. But he came out in 1972 with Man from Deep River, which was considered the first Italian cannibal film of the time. And so I'm sure you guys have heard the term Italian cannibal films. But Man from Deep River, 1972, was considered the very first one. And it was basically same thing as Cannibal Holocaust, a little toned down, there wasn't as much, but there still was quite a bit, to it. And, there was nudity, there was male genitalia, female genitalia, all shown throughout it. There was violence, there was a lot of stuff that he basically pioneered into the film industry, So you can call him a sleaze, but I call him a pioneer.
A lot of these foreign ones are considered sleaze just because I think their definition of that in movies is different than ours.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of British people are like, oh, that's not coming after the British or anything, but
it was a British film. Like, we're out.
Because it hits England first, then it comes to the Americas. So I feel like they were like, oh, this is not good, But then he also came out with Eaten Alive, which is one of the most iconic cannibal films of all time, and then Cannibal Ferox, not Cannibal Holocaust, Cannibal Ferox, which is a little toned down from Cannibal Holocaust in my opinion, but Eaten Alive is like, if not above Cannibal Holocaust, or right up there with it. Definitely go give that a watch. He did a ghost movie in like the late 80s, not really a huge success, I think it was just called Ghost House.
Roadhouse.
But yeah, not really a big movie. And yeah, Ghost House, 1988. I think it was based off some sort of novel. It was a slasher kind of thing too. Not really my favorite. He did Nightmare Beach. He did Nightmare City, which is another cannibal movie. And then basically he sat silent, and then he died in 2017. Cause of death unknown. So that's really. Yeah, he was old. He was born.
He was just like that.
1931, so he was 86 when he died. So
been a variety of things.
He lived a good life, but definitely one of my favorite directors in the Italian horror film. I loved Man from Deep River. I love that movie, and then I love the Carol Baker Orgasmo. Those are so like you're sitting there, you're watching it, like you don't care that there's like any kind of like sleaziness involved. Yeah. You're like, who the hell did this? Is this really happening? You're like so into the story at that point. Like you really could wrap your mind around the whole story.
It makes me wonder why they did the sleazy part. The storyline was so intriguing.
I think just to get people to come see it. That's what I think, because it's not like, that was like one of his first ones. It's like, oh, there's.
Like, people will come to the theater if I promise sleaze.
Yes.
But I'll keep them, like, watching the movie with my storyline.
Yeah, because the storyline, I'm like, this is so cool. And, like, you think, like, she's going crazy. You think, like, she's some, like, rich, eccentric drunk that just is crazy the whole time, And, no, there's really a lot more going on than you'd think, So that's my number 8.
Yeah. So for my next pick, I did probably my second favorite director next to Wes Craven. I did John Carpenter. Which, for those of you that don't know, John Carpenter is probably best well known for directing 1978's Halloween.
Yes, yeah, he definitely is.
He was born January 16th in 1948 in Carthage, New York, which I think is upstate New York.
Yeah, it's up by Watertown.
Yeah,
which is kind of like where we're from.
He developed an early interest in filmmaking, and he went to the University of Southern California School of Cinematic Arts, and he came out with the iconic movie Halloween in 1978, and this movie was made on such a low budget. Mm-hmm. It's crazy that it became the success that it was.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with you.
Even the Michael Myers mask was just like a spray painted Captain Kirk mask that they got from the costume store because they couldn't afford to do anything like original. The leaves, because they wanted to make it fall themed, they had to buy like fake leaves and sprinkle them on the sidewalk, but they could only afford like one box. Right. So every time they sprinkled on the sidewalk, they had to pick them back up, save them, and they're like, no, we need the money.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely did the iconic movie Halloween. He did go on to do some other movies, probably not as notable, but he did direct The Thing. He directed They Live. And I didn't know, but he directed Christine.
Yep, The Mouth of Madness.
The Mouth of Madness. He directed The Fog as well.
Yes, The Prince of Darkness.
Prince of Darkness. So he went on to do some other works that had more probably mixed reviews, not as successful.
I feel like more of a cult following, like the Halloween and the Thing got, you know.
But even just coming up with the music for Halloween alone would have been enough. Like he could have retired after that, just coming up with that music. Then,
I forget who did the musical work on that.
I don't know, but he helped because it'll say musical screen by John Carpenter and all that.
Yeah, he wrote the score, but the guy that did it, he could have retired off that, you know.
Call it a day after that. You don't need anything else. And even the jack-o'-lantern in the beginning is so such a boss job of a jack-o'-lantern. It's nothing extravagant. It's just a very low budget.
I know, it's a cheesy little jack-o'-lantern.
Yeah. And they rely on a lot of things, same as Jaws, they rely on a lot of things the way the camera shot, music, a lot of things to make it look scarier and better than what it is.
Right.
Essentially, but it's still a great movie. And yeah, what a great director, and to have a lasting impact on culture 40 years later is just crazy. To have a movie that's continuously still being remade. It's being remade every other year.
Sure.
And it's just talked about. Michael Myers is constantly talked about. He's one of the pillars of the horror genre, so I just think it's definitely a feat.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I really do like a lot of John Carpenter's films. I mean, I think he's a great director. Thing is one of my favorite movies, and I think he just hit the nail on the head with that.
Yeah.
And again, too, The Mouth of Madness I talked about, and then Prince of Darkness. I love that movie because that's a really good way. It's kind of like a sci-fi movie, but also kind of like a biblical movie because it talks about Lucifer and the creation of the world and everything, but it's also kind of interdimensional, super weird. And Alice Cooper's in it too, so
that's random.
Oh yeah, he's one of the. Oh, you gotta watch that movie. I gotta show you that. That's a great film. Yeah, he's in there, and he's one of the homeless people that get the call from Satan to come and start standing around this church where this thing is being held. It's the blood of Satan, basically. It's a great. Oh, I love that movie.
Definitely an innovative director.
Oh, for sure.
And having lasting impact, and his name will forever be known in the horror community.
Yeah, John Carpenter is definitely one of the GOATs, for sure.
One of the GOATs.
All right, so for my next one, I got Dario Argento. So he was born in Rome. He was the son of a Sicilian film producer, Salvatore Argento, and a Brazilian photographer. He was raised Catholic, got into films, involved with film as a teenager, and then he basically went on to write film reviews for a newspaper. And then he started working as a screenwriter in the 60s, and basically the rest was history after that. He actually ended up working as a screenwriter on one of the most famous movies, in my opinion, in the entire world. I think a lot of people agree with it. It was Sergio Leone's spaghetti western Once Upon a Time in the West in 1968. Dario Argento actually wrote some of the screenplay for that. Which is amazing because that's one of the most famous and iconic films.
He's definitely a huge name in the horror genre, for sure.
Oh, Argento, yeah, for sure. I mean, to have his name tied to Sergio Leone, who wrote Once Upon a Time in America and then Once Upon a Time in the West before that, I mean, those movies are timeless movies. I mean, you can watch those in the year 3000 and be like, yes, I definitely agree with what they're saying. So yeah, he was born in Rome, got involved. His big breakthrough was really in the 70s, when he came out with The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, which is, or plumage, I think is how you say it. And, that was basically the iconic giallo film. Everyone recognizes it as one of the most iconic giallo films ever. Then he came out with Cat o' Nine Tails. He was basically a big giallo director. but he kind of like branched off in like the supernatural aspect with the movies. Even John Carpenter has frequently referred to Argento's influence.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so he's very prominent because he did a lot of stuff in the early '70s. His big breakthrough in the '70s, though, was with I think Suspiria for the supernatural aspect. I mean, he made countless giallos that were awesome in the '70s. My favorite, Cat of Nine Tails, that's one of my favorite giallo movies. But Suspiria definitely was his big, like, supernatural kind of horror
Probably
thing.
his biggest movie, I'd say.
I think most people recognize him for Suspiria. Right.
And it was just remade recently with Mia Goth and Dakota Johnson.
Yes, you were right. Yeah, and I like that one too. That was really well remade. And I like how they made it like a lot longer than the original one too. They definitely gave it more of a story, you know, kind of, you know, what's going on with this thing. So that movie was actually supposed to be part of a trilogy, which was compiled of his 1980s Inferno, and then Mother of Tears, which I had not seen in 2007, which concluded the trilogy. And then in the 80s, he tried to go more back with the conventional giallo style, which is basically a crime horror movie. There's a lot of murders. It's basically like trying to catch a serial killer is what a giallo movie is, essentially, with Tenebrae. And then he attempted to combine the two with Supernatural and giallo with 1985's Phenomena, also known as Creepers, which is one of my favorite actresses, Jennifer Connelly's earliest movie roles. And I love that movie because that was
Jennifer Connelly.
Well, no, not because of that, but it was because it was actually like this. It was actually had Donald Pleasence in it from Halloween.
Oh, okay.
He was a scientist that was studying how insects have not kinetic, but like they had thought, basically. They could they could see things and comprehend them.
Also, a fun fact quick about Donald Pleasence is he did not want to be in Halloween at all. Probably because he thought it was going to be so low budget, he didn't think it'd be successful at all. And he was kind of, I guess, like a well-established, he's like a well-established actor at the time. So well. I guess he showed up on set every day, late, drunk, like didn't want to be there. And he's like, "This movie's going nowhere." But you bet your ass, every sequel they want to.
Oh yeah, he was in it.
He was in every sequel. He's like, "All right, I'll make the sequels," but original, he was drunk all the time. Showed up late.
Yeah, we'll have to watch Phenomenon because I feel like this movie everybody should see because it has Donald Pleasence. He's a scientist that basically studies abilities of insects. And Jennifer Connelly has this cognitive ability that the insects have, and they can communicate. So, like, flies see something, she can see what the fly saw, essentially.
Oh, so
it's really kind of cool. Yes, it's essentially being the fly. It's super, super cool. Great movie. And he basically has directed movies up until this day. I think last year, 2021.
Oh, he's still alive?
Oh yeah, Dario Argento. Yeah, he made a movie. I think it was called Dark Sunglasses. Still haven't seen it yet. I've heard good and bad things about it. Just haven't really been able to find where to watch it yet. So I'm looking super forward to watching it because he's one of my favorite directors of all time. Is Dario Argento. So I can't wait for that. He actually took under his wing too back in the '80s. Was Mario Bava's son, Lamberto Bava, and you guys with foreign horror, Demons and Demons 2. Dario Argento wrote the screenplay for that. So Demons and Demons 2, everybody knows that. They go to the movie theater, they watch this movie, they all get possessed and turn into demons, and it's a bloodbath after that. Love the frickin' movie. Super iconic. But, yeah, that's all I got to say about my man Dario here.
My man Dario.
I love this man.
I love this man.
He's freaking awesome. I mean, who else can have such a film career? I mean, just in horror alone, become that prominent, you know.
I agree for sure. So my next pick is someone that definitely I enjoy, but there's not a ton to say about because he's kind of new to the scene. He's only like 40 years old, actually.
Oh, really?
But I picked Ty West. He was born October 5th, 1980 in Wilmington, Delaware. But one of his first movies was The Innkeepers, which we watched that movie. They work at the hotel like overnight, and it's closing, and they kind of have some paranormal activity.
Oh yeah, that was really good.
There's like a what do they call it? A psychic or somebody that lives there, and she's saying that she sees ghosts and all that. That was one of his first movies.
Who was the girl? She was like Disney Channel.
I think she was the Bridge to Terabithia. I think it was that girl, wasn't it?
No, I thought she was like a Disney Channel girl.
Maybe, I don't know.
I can't remember.
Anyway, so he went on to do House of the Devil, which I touched on a couple episodes ago. I think for our cult movies I did. Yes. Which House of the Devil is a great movie. We actually just rewatched it after that episode. Yeah. And I love Ti West because he took, another low budget situation and made it into a good movie. And he filmed it like it's in the 70s, so it looks low budget, but it looks like a typical 70s horror movie.
Yes.
And I love House of the Devil. He did The Sacrament, which is kind of the Jim Jones movie.
Yeah, that's a really good movie.
Yeah, it's filmed kind of like they're like Vice.
Yes.
Making a Vice documentary. Yeah. He actually helped direct the first VHS as well, which I didn't know that.
Yeah, and the guy that did The Ritual, too, also had a part in that. Yeah. He did a couple other movies, too.
All the VHS movies have, like, multiple different horror directors kind of contributing a different story, but Ti West is one of them. Mm-hmm. He did You're Next, which I love You're Next. I think I touched on that. Fun. Yeah, I touched on that, I think, I want her to be one of my final girls when we do that episode. He did the second Cabin Fever. He did my personal favorite, X, which came out in 2020. He did X, and he's actually working on the whole trilogy that's going to be X, and then he did Pearl, and then Maxine comes out later this year. But I love X. I think it's such a fun, great slasher movie. I touched on this in the first episode. Love that movie.
It was good.
So, inevitably, I love Ti West. I mean, the other movies he did were good, too, but I love X. I love Pearl. I think him and Mia Goth are a great team together. And I'm so excited to see Maxine. For being new on the scene, I would say he's done some pretty iconic movies. Like, he's done some really well done movies.
Yes.
And a fun fact about him is he did the second Cabin Fever, which, for those of you who don't know, Eli Roth did the first one.
Oh, yeah.
And Ti West directed the second one. And I guess after all was said and done, like after the editing and everything was done, Ti West hated it. And he wanted his name removed from the movie.
Oh, really?
And they're like, yeah, buddy, you can't do that. It's not how it works. But he fought and was like, I don't want my name on this movie. And they put it on anyways. But I guess there's some director's cut somewhere of like what he wanted, essentially.
Okay.
And then what they edited it to be.
Oh, really? Yeah. That's so shitty. So
and he's like, take my name off the movie. And they're like, no, we need a director.
Yeah, he kind of got like...
He got screwed there.
Yeah.
But I thought that was interesting because I'm like, it's kind of cool to direct. Eli Roth did the first one, he did the second one, but it must have been not at all what he envisioned for him to take his name off of it.
Yeah, because I remember watching the second one.
It's terrible.
This is not good.
It's terrible. So it makes sense that he didn't want anything to do with it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Because, I feel like that was more of just like jumping on the fact that it was a Cabin Fever movie. Because Cabin Fever was an awesome... the original one I thought was great. The second one, what the hell is this?
He's new, but he's pretty talented. Like, they're coming out with those movies. I think he's a talented director, and I'm excited to see what else he comes out with for sure.
Oh, yeah, no, I can definitely see him making some good movies. Yeah. I mean, some of the VHS ones that he's done are amazing, like, oh, that's sick,
Yeah.
Like that one, I think it was in the second or first VHS, I can't remember which one. I think it was in the first one, but when they're going to that haunted house in like LA, and they go in there and there's nobody in there and doing like the satanic ritual in the attic, and I'm like, that was
probably him because he did the whole House of the Devil thing, and
that's what I kind of think was like the precursor to it,
And she does the same thing. She goes in the attic and there's a whole satanic ritual basically waiting for her.
Yeah, I think that was super freaking.
Yeah, I didn't know he did Your Next either, which I love that.
Yeah, movie. I had no idea.
That's a great movie.
I always thought Eli Roth did The Sacrament, but that's Ti West. That blows my mind. Because I love that. That was super well done.
It's long and it's kind of a slow burn, but it's a good movie.
Yeah, I mean, that makes you feel like you were at Jonestown, essentially. I mean, there wasn't as many people that killed, 900 people. You're not going to get 900 people to act in that movie, but,
it's pretty accurate.
Yeah, I definitely think that's super, super on point.
Yeah, the guy's name in The Sacrament, the main guy that is like mimicking Jim Jones, his name is even Gene Jones.
No way.
Yeah. That's his name in the movie. It's Gene Jones.
I didn't even pick up on that. That's Alright, so for my next one, I did Lucio Fulci. He was born, and so he's one of my favorites too. I don't have a lot of favorites. These are all my favorites, in case you haven't realized. But he was born in Travis, Travestier Rome on June 17th, 1927. His mother, Lucia, was from a poor but reputable Sicilian family, politically anti-fascist family in Messina, Sicily.
That's cute. I wonder if he's named after his mom.
That's what I'm kind of thinking.
Yeah. Just Lucia and Lucia.
Lucio, yeah, or Lucio, or how you'd say it. So basically, he always kind of had an interest in film. And then in the 50s, he got involved in writing comedy as well. I feel like a lot of these horror movie directors in Italy started doing comedy.
Well, there's a lot of dark aspects to comedy, so maybe that's where they pull from.
That could be it, too. And Lucio, he's kind of got like a very sad story, too, because he kind of... The way he dies is very sad. But I won't go really too much into that, but it is very kind of sad. So anyway, let's continue on here. So he ends up working for like a comedy, doing like screenplay for a comedy duo. And then it wasn't until like the late 60s, early 70s that he started directing his own movies. And the first one he did was 1969. It was a giallo film, being in Italy. It was called A Lizard in a Woman's Skin. Haven't seen that one. Really want to watch it. He did a couple spaghetti westerns too, I think, or helped direct with them or produce. Massacre Time was one. It had Franco Nero and George Hilton. So any of the giallo people listening out there, I'm sure you know those two stars. He had that come out in 1966. And then I think his big giallo debut was Don't Torture a Duckling. And I absolutely loved this movie when I first saw it in 1972. There's a super messed up kill scene with gore, blood, and everything. And it's just like, what the hell's going on the whole time in the movie? And you're like so involved in it. This is the one movie I really got like super involved in. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
There's these kids that are getting killed, and it's a touchy subject because they're kids. They're like 10 years old, and they're getting like mutilated and stuff like that. So it's kind of like, what's going on in all this? And then like find out there's like this witch involved, but she's really not a witch. It's just everybody in the town paints her to be a witch because she's like herbalistic and like esoteric and stuff like that. And it's very like anti-Catholic because he's very like painting the church as being like witch hunters, you know, and stuff like that. So I absolutely love that movie. And then his really big claim to fame came in like the 80s. I don't think he really did a lot in the 70s minus the... okay, I'm sorry. He did. He did like Zombie. I think he did Psychic, I think it was called, in 77. They were kind of like crime giallo, but like his really big like cult following came in the 1980s and late 70s with Zombie 2, which was Zombie, the one that we've mentioned on this podcast. And then he also did City of the Living Dead, The Black Cat, which is an Edgar Allan Poe like rendition of stories. And then The Beyond, which I have mentioned in this as well. And Beyond is one of the greatest movies of all time because even Quentin Tarantino has used this for inspirations for some of his films because it's just so over the top. It's the one with the spiders that I was telling you about. Then House by the Cemetery. And then one of my favorites was 1982's The New York Ripper. And this one is, I think, the best giallo film ever made because it's this... this killer, and he talks like Donald Duck. So he's like, the way he's talking, all the cops are like, talking on the phone to them like that. And I freaking love that. And it's just super, super good. And then Supernatural thriller too. That same year, Manhattan Baby, which is a great one. It's these people that go over. It's this archaeologist that goes to Egypt and ends up finding like these tablets that have like this ancient curse on them, and then it brings this demon into the world. Cat in the Brain in the 90s was probably one of his last great ones before he started on his decline. And I just want to touch a little bit because I think he's got one of the saddest stories. So basically, he died on March 13th, 1996 of hyperglycemic coma. He went into a coma from diabetes, essentially, and passed away at the age of 68. But up until then, basically from like the mid 80s up until his death, he just was like a recluse. Just didn't like Dario Argento tried getting him out to like redirect movies and stuff like that, and like get back into it. But what I had found out, and I just want to touch on it, his wife back in 1969 had done some stuff to herself where she's not living anymore. And his daughter also was basically paralyzed, full body paralysis.
Oh my God.
After 1974, I think is the earliest date I could find. Not a really whole lot of talk is about this, but he basically never remarried, never, like, after his wife had died, he just stayed.
Just gave up.
Yeah, and I think, and then just went on a decline, and it's super sad, and I'd love to watch there's a documentary actually made about him called Falsy or Fake, basically, and it touches on a lot of that stuff, and it's just he lived. I think he's one of my favorite, like all-time favorite directors. He's up there with my number ones, and I think he's just super super great, and it's just really sad to lose somebody like that, and
it's terrible.
So, and a lot of people have looked up to him for all his work, and a lot of it has been put into modern cinema. Like Robert Rodriguez did a lot of that stuff with Planet Terror. He took a lot of his stuff from Lucio Fulci's movies. And Quentin Tarantino, too. I mean, some of the biggest directors today, he even looked back at him as, like, the greatest of all time. And he really was. I agree. And it's just, he lived a sad life, and I just never knew that about him and learned it today and thought I should share it with you guys.
That's really bad.
So, definitely go and check out a lot of his movies because they are freaking awesome, especially his early Giallo stuff. You're going to be on the edge of your seat trying to figure out what the heck is going on in these movies.
Okay. So on a happier note, I guess. For my next pick, I did Tobe Hooper.
Oh, yes.
Which, for those of you that don't know, he might not have as big of a name as like Carpenter and Wes Craven and all that. But Tobe Hooper directed the original 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which for the time is just such an iconic feat. I mean, this movie was labeled like appalling. It was so controversial for the time. I mean, to come out with that movie in the 70s was just like, and it was like his third movie that he made. Like, he was on 2 different movies, he helped produce them, didn't really do much, and then he just comes out of the gate with Texas Chainsaw. And just the concept itself is crazy.
Right.
And I believe he's from Austin, Texas, which I always wondered watching that. I'm like, I feel like you can't make this movie unless you're from Texas.
Yeah, right.
Because it's so, like, there's so much stigma around, like, backwoods Texas and all that.
Like, it's such a huge state. It's like, what the hell's going on in this, like, massive freaking state?
All this land out there that's not popularized by a lot of people. And, I believe he's from Austin, Texas, and he created this movie, and it's just, I love Texas Chainsaw. I love a lot of the spin-offs from it, a lot of the sequels, the remakes. Definitely a controversial and appalling movie for the time. I could see why. Mm-hmm. It pulls a lot from, I'd say, Psycho, Ed Gein, like the real serial killer, wearing somebody's skin as a mask.
Right. Yeah, they definitely pulled a lot of that off him, I think, for sure.
Leatherface is just an iconic, I guess he'd be a slasher. Or villain.
No, he definitely, I consider him a slasher, I guess, because he's appeared more than once,
Yeah, I would definitely say Leatherface is a pretty iconic slasher. I mean, there's so many iconic scenes in this movie, like the dinner table scene alone. Mm-hmm. When they're all sitting around like that, it's just, you gotta watch it. Everybody needs to see this movie once in their lifetime. It's crazy. And then he went on to do some other movies. He did Eaten Alive. He actually did the Steven Spielberg movie, Salem's Lot, 1979.
Love that movie.
Which I didn't know he directed that.
Yeah, I was trying to think, because I know he did a Stephen King one, but I couldn't remember which one. But yeah, Salem's Lot, that would make sense.
He did Poltergeist, which is a huge feat.
Yeah.
I mean, he did that with Steven Spielberg.
Yep, he produced Steven Spielberg produced it.
To come from, he was probably stigmatized, I'm sure, after Texas Chainsaw that he can only do, Paul and controversial
movies.
So to go from that to being able to work side by side with Steven Spielberg is pretty iconic.
Sure.
He ended up doing Invaders from Mars. Mm-hmm. He did Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and then a couple other movies here and there, but yeah, Tobe Hooper is definitely an icon, definitely paved the way for a lot of the movies we have today. If he didn't break that barrier with Texas Chainsaw back in the day, who knows what horror movies would look like now.
I know, and he really brought it, because that was, the Grindhouse
He brought it full force. There was nothing being left behind. Everything's shown. Everything's right in your face.
I think it was the title, too, because, you had movies like Last House on the Left, which I think, in my opinion, Last House on the Left was way more violent than Texas Chainsaw.
I agree.
But, the title of Texas Chainsaw, people are like, what the hell is that? So they're, flocking to the theaters.
And the way it was marketed, too, there's that whole scene in the beginning where there's all this wording saying it's based on a real-life massacre. And I've watched that movie with people that say, oh, this is real. And I'm like, no, it's not.
No, it's really
maybe somewhere in backwoods Texas it's happening, it's not an actual thing.
Right.
So, just the way it was marketed, I'm sure people watching it, the internet wasn't really around, so I'm sure nobody could look it up and be like, did this massacre happen?
Right.
After watching it. So they're probably appalled, they're shocked, they're like, this is a true story.
Sure.
I would have killed to be in the theater when that
movie came out. I would have loved to have been like a fly on the wall.
And just hear all the gasps and all the people being like, oh my god! They're showing that. But yeah, Last House on the Left, I'd say, is more disturbing and a
shock
morality.
value.
I say in a morality way. Texas Chainsaw, I think, is more shocking and fun. In
a fun way, yeah.
It's in a fun, it's not real. We're all joking around here, fun way.
Well, I don't know, because they said it's based on a true story.
That's true. Maybe I haven't
thought.
That's true.
Yeah, I'm watching live footage.
That's one thing I want to touch on for X is the way X is filmed. At the end, it's almost like it was a real story, because they filmed it all firsthand.
Yes.
And then at the end, it finds the footage and watches it all, and it's almost like it's happening firsthand. And I just I like when movies do that. It kind of breaks the fourth wall.
I do too. That's the Hell House thing. It's how it's so this is real. You guys got to see this. It's real.
It's very informal. It's not the higher level horror that some other directors might have.
Yes.
It's more informal.
It's more to the person. It's not this is not real, but it's just watch it. You might think it is, know. Or you can see the same thing. No, I definitely agree with you there. So for my next one, I got Mario Bava. Another one of my favorites. So he was born on July 31st, 1914. He was an Italian director. His father actually worked in cinematography as well during the silent movie era. And Mario basically took in his father's footsteps. So during the 50s, he started getting into cinematography and working with Riccardo Freda and other filmmakers. One of the first movies is Ivan Fury, which is one of the first Italian horror films ever made. It came out in 1957. And then he also did The Day the Sky Exploded in 1958, the first Italian science fiction movie that ever recorded. Went on to do that up until basically the 1960s, and that's when Mario's career really took off, was the 1960s. So, excuse me. Basically, 1960s introduced Mario to Giallo, and first movie that was considered his Giallo crime horror was The Girl Who Knew Too Much, otherwise known as The Evil Eye. And Michaela, I'm sure you'd love to hear this, but it starred the one and only John Saxon, which was Nancy's father.
Love John Saxon.
Yep.
Nightmare on Elm Street and Black.
Oh, and he was a baby in this too. He was probably only 25, 30. Yeah. And great film, one of my favorites. And then after that, it went on to Blood and Blackface, the iconic, the pinnacle of Giallo. This movie was considered the first Giallo film, was Blood and Blackface. And if you ever watch this movie, you're going to be like, I did not see that coming at all. I did not think that person was going to be the killer. Yeah. This is insane. And then he went on to do Kill Baby Kill in 1965, another good one. It's kind of like a gothic horror. Danger Diabolik. Oh, that movie, 1966. That was awesome. That's like a James Bond spy movie that you're going to fall in love with. And then he got really into the horror in the 70s with A Bay of Blood, which we talked about, Lisa and the Devil. What was the other one? I gotta look at. Hang on, excuse me. In the 70s. Bay of Blood. Oh, Shock was his last film that he was in. Oh, Baron Blood. I'm sorry, that was the other one. Early 70s. And then Shock was his last film. Baron Blood was very good too. But Shock was his last directed movie. And then Inferno, he did the screenwrite for that for Dario Argento. And that was when he died, was in 1980.
Oh, wow.
So he lived to be 65 years old. He died of a heart attack. But yeah, he basically... Oh man, he was a great director. He actually did some work with Martin Scorsese back in the mid-60s. Don't really know exactly what they worked on together, but he did help Martin Scorsese get into the limelight a little bit. But yeah, his film legacy is just phenomenal. I mean, if you love foreign film, Mario Bava is going to be right up there on number one for foreign,
for sure,
horror, foreign crime, foreign trauma. The Body and the Whip, I believe that was with Christopher Lee, and that's a really good one. Kind of sadomasochistic, vibes with it, but very good because it's a crime story, but it's also a murder story, so it's a slasher film, So a lot of these films with these Gallo movies are very, people don't like to think of them as horror. They think of them crime. No, it's horror because there's somebody getting killed. There's a serial killer on the loose. It's no different, just because they're not, Jason Voorhees or something, At least that's my opinion. But that's my Mario Bava take. A lot of his movies also, I just want to make a quick note, were deplored on Mystery Science Theater 3000. So if any of you guys out there have watched that growing up, I'm sure a lot of you have. So you've probably seen a few of his movies. He did some like sci-fi ones too, like Hercules on Mars and stuff like that. So you've definitely seen them on Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Okay, so for these next couple ones, I'm going to try to go through a little quicker, just because we've been recording for a minute. But for my next pick, I did Eli Roth, which for anybody that doesn't know, Eli Roth did Hostel. His first movie was Cabin Fever, which we touched on in the last one that Ty West recreated.
Yep.
Green Inferno, he did Knock Knock, and he did Thanksgiving. That's his newest thing. It came out in 2023, which I love Thanksgiving. I thought it was such a fun horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
But he's definitely known as having splatter films, I would say.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
His level of gore is just next level. And I read some background about him, and he was born April 18th, 1972, and he was, I think, the middle child of three brothers. And he started shooting films at the age of 8 after seeing Alien.
Oh, really?
And it's cute. I guess there's hundreds of videos of him and his brothers out there, and they're shooting films together, trying to direct films, and there's all these at-home footage videos of them. And I think that's really cute.
That's cute, yeah.
Something else interesting I found.
That's funny.
Actually, there's a couple things I found about Eli. His dad was a psychology teacher at Harvard, which is funny because you watch Eli's movies and you're like, this guy probably could use a psychiatrist, the way he directs and all the gore and everything. You're like, we probably could use some help.
Yeah, sure.
Another thing is, I guess to fund his films while he was in college, he would pose himself as a woman on Craigslist and work as he would pose as a cyber sex operator. And he would dress up as a woman and take pictures of himself, and that's how he would fund his movies during college.
That's crazy.
So talk about devotion.
Yeah, seriously.
Really putting everything into these movies and really believing in himself.
Oh my god, that's awesome.
I think it definitely paid off. Yeah. I love Eli Roth movies.
Oh my god, yeah. Hostel is one of my favorite film trilogies.
Yeah. Hostel, The Green Inferno.
Yes, that too.
Thanksgiving was so fun, and for him to get a theater release after so long and have it be so successful, it's on Netflix now. I'm happy for him.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely. And like I said, we were talking today actually about. I think Thanksgiving is going to be like one of the movies that's going to be like up there because I got like almost an 8 out of 10 for a horror movie.
Yeah, he did like a short film with the same sequence like 10 years ago, and then kind of just trashed it, and then I guess he came back and revisited it this year and actually made it into a full movie.
Right.
So yeah, I love Eli Roth.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I'm gonna try to speed through my last four. I wish we had more time, but so I'm going to pick David Cronenberg here for my next one. So he was born in Toronto on March 15, 1943. He was born into a prominent progressive Jewish family. So Cronenberg got his start basically back in the mid 70s is when he got really big. I'm just going to jump right to that with Rabid. He actually hired a adult actress to play in these two movies, Rabid and Shivers, and that was kind of like her big breakthrough from the adult film industry into like modern Marilyn Chambers. If any of you guys, elderly people out there watching this realistic, know that name. So that was her big role into like the golden era, I guess, of cinema or whatever you want to call it. And then, so his movies basically, but his big claim to fame was Scanners in 1981, and then he came out with The Brood after that, Videodrome starring James Woods, and then The Fly. So he's
definitely a creature feature.
Yeah, like body horror is his big thing. And David Cronenberg, I mean, he's just the monster god. I mean, he's just got praised by everybody. George Lucas has praised him for his effects and everything. The Brood alone, the effects in that were just amazing.
The Fly.
Yeah, that is one of the most iconic.
And the body, the head explosion scene from Scanners is well done as well.
Yeah, that's like how you picture it. So I mean, he's just very hit the nail on the head with all of that body horror stuff. And he basically, that was really kind of he kind of went on to do like some other movies after that. I don't think were that big of success as the ones that he did in the 80s. And he's still alive today, so he could definitely have some more in the works, So we'll just have Crash was, I think, his last big one. That was kind of like more like a noir film, like a, crime noir. I don't know how you can say it, noir. N-O-I-R, noir.
Definitely good. Definitely really good special effects.
Oh, Cronenberg's effects are amazing. Yeah, so he's definitely like when you think Cronenberg, you think monster body horror, or that or Brian Yuzna, which we should have touched on in this, but we'll have another episode. So.
Yeah, we'll have to. My phone's always going to die when we do those.
I know. We get these like super sensitive topics. We can't stop talking about it.
So for my next one, I picked James Wan, which he's actually he's from Australia, which I wouldn't have guessed.
South African, really? Australia?
Yeah, he's from Australia. He was born February 26, 1977, and iconic first movie he comes out with is 2004 Saw. Which
breaks the bank with that one.
And it was such a low budget film, and it turned into such a popular horror franchise, and I love Saw, especially the first one. Most people think the first one's the best, I would say.
Sure.
So to do the very first Saw, I don't know if he was a part of the rest of them, but I know he did the very first one. Definitely one of the most iconic horror movies of all time is Saw.
No, I definitely agree with you.
And then he didn't stop there. He could have definitely, a lot of these people could have just retired and called it a day, but no. He went on to do Insidious in 2010. He did The Conjuring in 2013 and the second Conjuring in 2016. I also didn't know this, but he directed Dead Silence.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh, was that him?
That was him.
Really? I thought it was James Wong with a G at the end.
He did Dead Silence and he did Malignant.
Malignant. Oh, Malignant was awesome. I freaking loved that. That was did not expect that coming.
He's definitely a horror king, I would say. He did some of the Fast and Furious movies too, so he kind of branched out a little bit. Mm-hmm. So he's gotta be worth a shit ton of money, I can imagine. for doing the Saw franchise and all that. That's crazy.
Sure. I didn't know he did Fast and Furious.
He did like Fast and Furious 7 or something.
Okay.
One of the millions of them.
Yeah, the 15 that they've made since the inception.
But like Insidious and all of those alone, like I love Saw, love Insidious. Those movies are so, especially Insidious and Conjuring, they're so well directed with like the camera angles and the music and the jump scares. It's also classy. It's a higher level.
Yes. No, I definitely agree with you.
He's a genius. I love James Wan.
Yeah, he definitely like can like find that nice fine line between like corny, and like shit your pants scary, you know.
Like horror can be corny sometimes. Like there's a lot of scenes that I laugh at inevitably because I'm like, that was too cringy.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Nun. Some of the scenes in that, like I was like, this isn't.
Yeah, some of it's a little cringy.
Yeah, it's not like scary. It's more kind of like that's just lame. Yeah. You know? So he didn't direct that. So
no. He started the Conjuring universe for sure.
Oh, for sure, definitely.
Do you want to pick one more?
Yeah, I guess I will go to. I'll just do H.G. Lewis here. So H.G. Lewis, Herschel Gordon Lewis, he was born June 15th, 1926. And he's basically the godfather of the splatter film. So I'm not going to get into any of his early details because we're running out of time here. But essentially, H.G. Lewis got the name Godfather of Gore because of 1963's Blood Feast, which we have talked about. But I just want to go over...
Blood Feast, all you can eat too?
No, but we will talk about that because John Waters, any of the people that love Pink Flamingos or Multiple Maniacs, which I love both those movies. They're awesome films. Drag Queens in general. Yeah. They are... He co-starred in that, but beside the point here, we're just going to try to dial this in real quick. So he basically Godfather of splatter. So he came out in 1963 with Blood Feast, super gory, pushing the limits of censorship in that time period of 1963. Let him actually produce it and come out with that movie. And then in 1964, 2000 Maniacs, which is like it's been remade actually. Robert Englund.
Right here.
Yes, right here. 2000 Maniacs, phenomenal movie. The original I like better, but in 2002, Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger, actually plays the mayor in the remake of this, and it's a bloodbath, a lot of gore, a lot of dismemberment, decapitation, blood and guts. My favorite era, though, of H.G. Lewis comes in the 1970s with The Wizard of Gore, which is basically... It's a cheesy and sleazy snuff film of people getting mutilated on stage by this guy named Montag, who is the Wizard of Gore.
Yeah.
And he's basically like tricking the audience into thinking he's not really mutilating these people, but he's actually mutilating these people. And then the Gore Girls. That's basically the Gore Girls is the sleaziest it can get for horror.
Yeah, it sounds
There's go-go dancing. There's people getting their nipples chopped off.
Not cute anymore.
I love it, man. It's just outrageous. There's freaking entrails getting like strewn across the entire house. It's just insane for the time. 1972. No one's doing this yet. He is the Godfather of Gore, and he's lived a crazy life. I believe he has passed away. I don't know when though. 2016 he passed away. But yeah, Blood Feast, all you can eat too, was the John Waters cameo. And sorry that wasn't like a great ending to this. I was just trying to run out on time. But yeah, he's great. And Lucio Fulci also gets the Godfather of Gore title, but I definitely think H.G. Lewis definitely did it first because 1963, he's having this woman's brain being removed from her skull on the beach in Florida and Miami. So,
I mean, what else can you really ask for?
Yeah, and you're watching the whole thing happen. Lucio Fulci wasn't even thinking about doing stuff like that. So,
I mean, well, yeah, what else do you really want besides that?
Definitely he died in Fort Lauderdale in 2016 at age 90. So there's that. And he's definitely the godfather of B movies. I've loved every single movie I've seen from him. I mean, it's your classic 60s go-go dancing, girls dancing, like, hey, let's go swim in the ocean. Yes, with the headband, the blonde hair, they're all like, ooh,
Oh, cute little go-go dancers.
Yes, it's a throwback to the 60s, and I freaking love it.
I just wanted to quickly shout out Ari Aster as a horror director. He's definitely came on the scene relatively recently, but definitely made an impact for sure. Mm-hmm. He came out with Hereditary in 2018, and then soon after, actually only a year later, he came out with Midsommar, which is crazy.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah. But those two movies alone have definitely had a huge impact on the horror genre, and he works with the company A24 a lot. He makes a lot of A24 movies. He went on to do Beau is Afraid.
I love that. Again, guys, go watch that movie.
Yeah, he did Dream Scenario with Nicolas Cage.
Oh, he did that too?
Yeah.
I didn't know he did that.
We watched that recently, and it's definitely an A24 movie.
That movie was awesome.
Like, he's just such a weird guy. Like, his movie for film school is called The Strange Thing About the Johnsons, and you can find it on YouTube, I think, but once you watch it, you'll never want to watch it again. It's extremely disturbing. And watching it, and you're like, this is what he submitted for film school. And, like, if you watch Midsommar alone, you're like, this is a strange guy. Like, he's got to be a weird dude, I would assume.
Out of the top 10, that's probably my number 4 is Midsommar.
But yeah, Strange Things About the Johnsons, if you ever want to get, like, really uncomfortable, look that up on YouTube.
Sure.
That's about it. I was going to touch on Rob Zombie, but we are going to have a whole episode dedicated to Rob Zombie. We're going to have one of our friends on and do a whole discussion about him.
Yeah, I was going to say, definitely save that for
so we didn't forget Rob Zombie. He is an iconic horror director and just persona in general.
Sure.
The community and the culture. So we didn't forget about him. We are going to do a whole episode dedicated to him.
Yes.
But for the time being, Nick, do you have anything else to say?
I would like to just touch on one of the greatest B horror movie directors for just generations in general. It's Roger Corman. I'm not going to go. I think we'll do a whole episode on him too, because he has lived a lifetime. He's given starts to Jack Nicholson, Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, and he has basically brought these people into the limelight because he's Roger Corman.
Yeah.
But basically, he is the king of cult, and I'm going to leave you guys with that. If you want to do your own research about him and learn a little bit more about Roger Corman, king of cult. We'll just leave you with that, and
we're signing off.
Yeah, till the next time, I guess.
So until next Monday, stay spooky.
Stay spooky, guys.